Hello there. Welcome to our show. This is Regarding Men, where we hold men in high regard. That's a rare and beautiful thing these days. And I'm Janice Fiamingo, and I'm joined today, as always, by the ineffable Paul Elam and the inscrutable Tom Golden. Just silly. My two wonderful colleagues. And today we're going to discuss Black Lives Matter, and especially looking at the Marxist feminist roots of this organization, which you would think, if you didn't know it, that you were reading something straight out of a women's studies program, as they outline their aims and their values. And I'm just going to read a little bit from the website, in which they do present themselves to the world and tell us what's important to them. They say that we make space for transgender brothers and sisters to participate and lead. We are self-reflexive and do the work required to dismantle cisgender privilege and uplift Black trans folk, especially Black trans women who continue to be disproportionately impacted by trans antagonistic violence. We build a space that affirms Black women and is free from sexism, misogyny, and environments in which men are centered. And finally, we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and, quote, villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable. Notice how there's never a mention of a father there. We foster a queer affirming network. When we gather, we do so with the intention of freeing ourselves from the tight grip of heteronormative thinking. I find that profoundly interesting and bizarre. It takes me straight back to my grad school days in the 1990s. This has been this kind of language. This is intersectional feminism through and through. This kind of language has been rife all across the humanities and social sciences in North American and Western universities since the 1990s. And now we are seeing its effects in the wider community, even in an organization like this that claims to have found its impetus in police and other what they call state-sanctioned brutality, largely against Black men, cisgender, heteronormative Black men. But interestingly enough, these are precisely the people who must not be centered in their articulation of their values and objectives. So, wow, let's drill down into this topic. This is quite an extraordinary statement, I think, from the three co-founders of Black Lives Matter.
Yes, by all means, let's drill down into the sludge of this Marxist puddle. I was just, I read a couple of weeks ago all that stuff that you read, Janice, and more from their website, which was equally disturbing in my book and bizarre when you consider, if you have any understanding of the values and lived experience of the Black community in the United States, you know that without any doubt, and I'm not saying this facetiously, I am more representative of Black values and Black men's lived experience than this group of privileged women. Mm-hmm. They absolutely are down on fathers, they're down on families. Mm-hmm. And I think what I'm getting from reading their material is that the message to Black men, on whom they count for raising all their millions of dollars and gaining public notoriety, the message to Black men is clear, and it's mind your place, boy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the message is. There's no doubt about it. And I think they count on, unfortunately, and this isn't just part of what's happening with the Black community, but with all subcultures and culture within the United States and the larger Western world, is that we are more swayed by slogans and sloganeering than we are by getting down into the facts behind the slogans. And because I do believe that if most Black men, and I certainly the ones that I know, if they were reading the details, and the ones that I know have, reject this stuff out of hand. Absolutely. But all we have to do is hold up a Black victim and point there and ask for money. And nobody, even in the Black community, is seeing what these people are really doing, which is, I mean, if anything has hurt the Black community over the past 50 years, it's been the undermining of the nuclear family. It's been social liberal policy that has sought to pay women to push fathers out of homes. And it's exactly what they're trying to propagate more of with this. So all I can say is, you know, if the Black community accepts this and wants to live by it, it is going to be at their own peril.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy stuff. You know, it's like they make the Black men secondary in the organization in some ways, but they depend on them for the monies that do come in. And all the while, the real problem is fatherlessness. And no one's saying a word about that.
No.
You know, that's not even on the agenda.
No.
But it's obviously, you know, the biggest problem that faces most any family, but especially Black families these days, is fatherlessness. And it's almost like, you know, the feminists have come along and they have made sure that fathers are extracted from the home. And then they come along and they try and reap the benefit of the disaster they have wrought. You know, it's almost like a circular kind of thing. It's just absolutely insane. And I just think that, you know, we need to love and honor Black fathers and help them out as much as we can. You know, that's what really needs to happen here.
Yeah, and that is never mentioned. In fact, I mean, in
it's very clear in their writing.
In all of the literature, the specific focus is actually on further dismantling the family. I mean, it's
yes.
This idea that somehow, well, it's that whole "it takes a village." Thank you, Hillary Clinton. It's that idea that if we diffuse the responsibility for raising children even more broadly onto a whole variety of actors who are not related to the child, who have no real stake, no passionate love for the child, no full-time commitment, that's actually going to make things better, weaken the family even further. I think the fatherless rate already, or the number of children born outside of wedlock, is what, 78% or something like that. So many of those children are growing up without a father, and that is never mentioned as an issue. And in fact, of course, it's encouraged. And the message to Black men in all of this intersectional feminist rhetoric is that you've had your moment. You organized in the past, and now we are going to organize. It says that explicitly. There's one part where it says Black liberation movements in this country have created room, space, and leadership, mostly for Black heterosexual cisgender men, leaving women, queer, and transgender people and others either out of the movement or in the background to move the work forward with little or no recognition. I mean, it's unbelievable. This is a movement supposedly founded because Black men are dying.
Exactly.
And this is supposed to be about concern over that. And yet that's a statement of resentment against Black men and a very clear determination that they will, as little as possible, be in positions of leadership, that they will have to take a back seat to the women, especially the queer women and the transgender women who are now going to come forward. It's awful. It's terrible politicking. And I'm just flabbergasted to see it so clearly displayed in an organization that must have many, many millions of eyes on it right now. People wondering, what is Black Lives Matter exactly? What does it stand for? And this is straight out of the most vicious politics of intersectional feminism. And I've seen it, and I've seen its results. It's been going on since the 1990s in the academy, and this is its fruit. It started with Kimberly Crenshaw in the 1990s, Bell Hooks, Shireen Razik. They all published lots of literature saying that Black women were particularly oppressed. They engaged in this power struggle with white feminists to say that they were far more oppressed, and that white feminists couldn't claim the moral legitimacy of the feminist movement because they didn't understand the particular suffering of Black women. White women's response to that was largely to say, okay, we will join with you as allies, and we will turn against white men even more viciously. And we will join with you in denouncing white men as the author of all problems, because it's all heteropatriarchal, imperialist fascism that is and capitalism, of course, that's responsible for all the suffering of all peoples, including non-white men. And it effectively splintered men into these various groups, various identity groups, so that rather than being able to join together in rejecting feminist politics, non-white men and queer men and various other groups, disabled men, for example, were told that they would get a pass, that they wouldn't have to apologize for their male privilege quite as much as white men, that if they joined in under the feminist umbrella, they would be allowed to be allies of the women, especially the Black and queer women who are going to lead the movement from the 1990s into the 21st century. And a lot of men, unfortunately, I think, thought that that was preferable. And so they all turned against the common enemy of white heterosexual men, who became particularly hated, but who also, of course, turned and apologized and found ways to claim that they weren't really, part of that oppressor group. And it's just been a mess of intersectional identity politics and jockeying for power and stabbing one another in the back. And it really has very little to do with caring about improving the lives of any people who are suffering. And it's about elevating a few people to positions of incredible privilege. And if you look at the biographies of these three women, it's just laughable to listen to their rhetoric about women being marginalized. It's crazy. Brian, I don't know if you put up the that webpage in which the women are featured and we learn their biographies. These women have been promoted and celebrated and given awards and put onto lists of the 50 most important up and coming Black women in America. They are writers, they are university graduates. One of them was a Fulbright scholar. That's an incredibly prestigious scholarship to be able to win, to travel abroad and to see the world, and one can only win it if one is in the creme de la creme of academic achievement. Right. Others have written books and are even now appearing, giving public talks, writing articles everywhere. The idea that these women are somehow marginalized and need to be brought out of the shadows to lord it over the supposedly privileged men who are their oppressors is just laughable. And it really shows it's the horror of identity politics in which you get, certain points, whoever is most supposedly oppressed gets the most points and can lord it over everybody else. And everybody else who has any kind of privilege at all, whether it's able-bodied privilege or heterosexist privilege or male privilege, it doesn't matter how poor you are. It doesn't matter what your actual experiences of the world are. You have to apologize forever and atone forever for whatever identity privilege you happen to possess according to the schema. It's crazy, and it bodes nothing good for the future of Black communities, or indeed for the future of race relations in North America and elsewhere in the world. And obviously it's been incredibly successful at raising money. It's got chapters throughout the world, as incredibly well organized chapters, because they're able to organize in a matter of a few days, following any instance of perceived or actual police brutality, to go into action to terrorize communities, to burn and to loot mostly Black neighborhoods, all in the name of Black liberation. It's
well, and what's really concerning to me about this one, I think you're absolutely right. It's the politics that claims that the homeless white man has more privilege than Condoleezza Rice. That sort of thinking is what permeates this. But when you look across the board, there was a recent Gallup poll that put Black Lives Matter at a 65% approval rating.
Amazing.
Across the United States. This is despite the fact that they're practicing this Marxism right out in the open. There's the hypocrisy of, for instance, last weekend in Chicago, 5 children among a bunch of other people gunned down by Black on Black violence in that city. And of course, Black Lives Matter is totally silent on that. Their interest is not in Black lives, except to the extent that they can fundraise off of the outrage. But here we have a hypocritical movement, totally based on identity politics, rich with double standards and hypocrisy. And it's more popular than Congress, more popular than either Joe Biden or Donald Trump, more popular than the Republican Party, than the Democrat Party. It is probably one of the most popular entities that we have in this culture today. And honestly, part of me says this is kind of why we're screwed.
Could it be just a Trojan horse in some ways?
Well, I think it's a Trojan horse with windows so that you can look inside.
Yeah, I know. It's not even hiding.
That's a good point.
It's not hiding its agenda. It's right there in plain sight. The agenda is to entirely pull down the entire basis of the United States of America and every Western country, and to rebuild it in a completely different Marxist feminist form. It's very upfront about that as its aims, and it is extraordinary to me that many people find that attractive. And it's true that many people do find it attractive. I mean, we've all seen the polls in which it's discovered that, young people, for example, have a very largely positive vision of socialism in general. The far left has succeeded in covering over its crimes and in peddling its particular utopian vision in such a way that many people are very attracted by it. And I mean, that's the other thing about the website. If you look at it, it is entirely utopian. Its expressed aim is conveniently, completely unrealizable. It says that they're committed to imagining and creating a world free of anti-Blackness, where every Black person has the social, economic, and political power to thrive. Well, that world will never be created. We will never have a world in which any, group of people, each individual person in that group has the, social, economic, and political power to thrive.
Well, of course, and if they wanted to get as close as they could to that, they would adopt conservative politics. That's almost a different topic altogether. But, one of the things I think needs to be said about this, and I say this as somebody that was raised in the American South, born in the mid-50s. I know racism. I've seen racism. I grew up with racist attitudes. As a matter of fact, I had to dedicate part of my late 20s, early 30s to excising the roots of that racism from my mentality, because that was what was normal when I was growing up. But I can tell you that world, in the world of white people, even the South, doesn't exist anymore.
It's gone.
There's nothing like that. I haven't heard any white acquaintance of mine use anything like the N-word or anything derogatory like that in years.
Yeah.
It's
and that doesn't, and that's the thing, I agree as well. I mean, I grew up in an era when all of that was already gone. I went to school in 1970. I thought Martin Luther King was presented as the model of, and then, it just seemed to me, well, what's the issue? Of course, you don't judge people by the color of their skin. Now I know all of this just sounds like protestation, proving my white privilege, etc. But I can honestly say I have never met a white person who expressed hatred on the basis of race for Blacks or for any other race. And right. Of course that's not to say that there is not racism in pockets, in individuals, right. Just as there are Blacks who are racist against whites and Asians who are racist against Blacks or against whites or whatever, yes, I mean, we all have, there is hatred in individual hearts everywhere for a variety of reasons and based on a variety of experiences. But to say that there is institutional, state-sanctioned, systemic racism, I just do not see the evidence for that. But the problem with this kind of a claim is that you will never get to the point where this organization can say our end,
of course not.
Our aim has been achieved. Just like the feminist movement.
Just like the feminists.
You can always find something. It doesn't matter how many measurable gains are made. It will never be enough because you'll always be able to claim that more could be done to improve the lives of the constituents that you supposedly speak for.
We have to recognize too, and it has to be said, the most common predictor of whether or not you're going to experience violence at the hands of police isn't race. It's whether or not you have a weapon and you're attacking them. Mm-hmm. That's the most common predictor of that violence. And of course, Black Lives Matter and just generally the left in general totally refuse to examine that.
Yeah. I mean, the structure, I mean, it is identical to feminism in everything in its worldview. Everything is divided up into oppressor, oppressed, and the oppressed is never responsible in any way. The oppressed is an innocent victim. The oppressor is always 100% responsible. It's founded on a lie. I mean, it's a revolutionary ideology, so it can never, it's not a reformist ideology. So it'll never reach a point where it says we can dissolve now. It will always have more demands. It will always be saying that, things are rotten and need to be entirely fundamentally transformed. Give us more money. Exactly. And it's based on a lie. It's based on the idea that the killing of Trayvon Martin by George Zimmerman was a state-sanctioned crime because he was acquitted. And it's based on the idea that Michael Brown was an innocent man who, he was unarmed, but all of the evidence shows that he was attacking the police officer who shot him. But it doesn't acknowledge the basic facts of the two sort of galvanizing moments that are its raison d'etre. So, it's lying through and through, and it is really scary that that we are at the point where people find that attractive. It is attractive if you don't actually think about how it works its way out. If you don't think about the lies that it's founded on, it's full of that revolutionary kind of fervor, the exhilaration, the ecstasy of protesting against a mass injustice. It invites everybody to participate in that, either as an ally or as an innocent victim. And if you're an ally, well, you can gain some measure of, atonement for the sin of being white, the original sin of being white. You can kneel, you can wash feet, you can apologize, you can give your money, you can give of your time to support the advancement of a group of people who designate you as their enemy, but who give you a kind of not quite full enemy status if you promise to be an obedient foot soldier. I don't find that attractive. I didn't find it attractive in feminism. I don't want to find it attractive in this version of Marxist feminist racial identity politics either, but many people do. And the whole idea, and I've had a few arguments on Twitter, although it's useless, but what it often comes down to when you really try to pin people to say what they, whether they believe that all lives matter or not, and whether they actually believe in racial equality, what it often comes down to in the case of feminism and in the case of Black Lives Matter is this is collective vengeance for the presumed or actual sins of the past. And they are quite willing to say that. And even that expression of resentment on the part of the lesbian and trans Black women who are now leading this movement, their resentment against Black men who have to apologize for their male privilege. The resentment, of course, against white society, against capitalist society is even greater. And the idea that it is just to take revenge on people for things that they never did and that their ancestors may not even have done, but that they are somehow responsible for merely because they're male or they're white and male. That is still very powerful. It's an ideology that can only lead to bloodshed and horror and oppression and injustice. And yet it is a very attractive ideology still, and it's what we see working here.
Well, it's also, I think it's important to point out that it's not just the attraction to the rush of protest. What I see happening is there's an adrenaline rush with destruction.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what I think Black Lives Matter is doing is trying to create those kind of adrenaline junkies, of people that are willing to commit arson, to assault people, to engage in all manner of violence. And particularly when you're young and unbridled, this kind of thing can have a very, very attractive allure for people. And I think this is exactly what they're counting on. Then it really pisses me off when I see people from the left like Marie Harf and others come on television and put a smiley face over this and say, oh, well, yeah, I sympathize with their cause. I'm just not one of those people. And they are seeking to legitimize these thugs that are out there creating pandemonium.
Yeah.
It's really unfortunate.
And like all good Marxists, I mean, the creating pandemonium is central and key. And what's that about? That's about intimidation. Intimidation. How much of the people who agree with this stuff do it out of fear, out of being afraid to say anything negative? But this whole intimidation thing blows my mind, because this is bullying. It's just freaking bullying. It's the same thing. And every one of these people go in and they say, oh, bullying is a terrible thing. Oh, bullying's awful. But they're out there bullying every day. Bullying people to apologize. That apology thing just blows my brain, because this is a technique used by the communist Chinese, used by Marxists in order to brainwash. It's the last little element in brainwashing. First, you attack the identity. You say, oh, you're a terrible person. Then you say, well, you should feel guilty. You should feel shame. And then once you get softened up, then they say, now you need to apologize.
And if you can get people to accept humiliation, you own them.
Yes, as soon as you apologize, then their work is over, because it's all your work now. You have this dissonance inside that says, I apologized, but I'm not bad. But yes, I am bad. No, I'm not. And this whole thing goes on where you're no longer a person. You're an automaton to the lemmings. It's like you're no longer a real guy. I mean, you're something else, like the male feminists. You see these guys all the time. I apologize for being male. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I'm able-bodied.
And it's the thing that pisses me off the most about this whole stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
It just really irritates
terrible.
me. Because...
And I mean, it's everywhere now, like the speed with which heads of corporations, nearly every academic department in every university across North America, arts organizations, libraries, large companies, and the speed with which they have come forward with their apologies, with their statements of support for Black Lives Matter, with their unwavering commitment to do whatever it takes to engage in extensive further affirmative action hiring or whatever it happens to be. It's mind-blowing. And the purging that's going on, anybody who fails to apologize, or even who simply doesn't apologize with enough fervor, is out. There's just recently a case at my old university, the University of British Columbia. The chair of the board of governors of the university, a well-respected businessman and lawyer, he got into trouble, if you can imagine, not for anything he said, not for any racist remark or action, but because he had liked on Twitter, he had liked a number of mainstream conservative statements. For instance, Dinesh D'Souza, who has come out with some criticisms of Black Lives Matter. Right. He liked these. Merely for liking them, he was forced out of his position. And not only was he forced out for that tiny, tiny non-crime of liking some things on Twitter, he apologized profusely. Oh, he went back and unliked.
Oh, no.
And
it did him no good.
It did him no good,
Zero.
Of course. Yeah,
Zero.
It was horrible. It was just an unbelievable act of bullying and of his acceptance of his bullying. And I'm seeing this all over. Like now, the impetus for for people to search back through their life history to find any little example of racism that they can now write about in an article for some magazine. I read something just the other day that someone sent me, a young man who's a doctor. He has degrees from Oxford and from Harvard Medical School, and he's an immigrant from Zimbabwe. And he was going through talking about the racism that he had experienced as a Black doctor. And he couldn't find anything really. There was one dementia patient who had said that he did not want to be seen by a Black doctor. He had one supervisor who mixed him up with another Black student when he was writing a letter of reference for him. One person who said, "You're different," and he didn't want to ask them what he meant by that. It was a teacher. I mean, they were so minute, so tiny, and yet obviously the sense of exhilaration, the rush to claim victimhood because of the power that comes with it, because of the ability to beat other people with the supposed reality of one's oppression. It's a really horrible and corrosive thing. It's corrosive for the souls, both of those who engage in their self-glorification as victims and for those who accept that and feel that they have to apologize because of their sex or their skin color, or especially both. It's just sad to see it. Yeah. So.
So much for another trip down Marxist alley.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, what it means is that, one just can't imagine that the real problems that plague Black neighborhoods are going to in any way be addressed or ameliorated.
By this. It isn't that they're just not, we're avoiding addressing, they're compounding the problems in Black neighborhoods through encouraging fatherless homes.
Yeah.
And they ultimately results in more victims that they can hang up. It's the same way that feminists are invested in women getting raped and beaten. That they have a vested financial interest in these problems. Yes. Because that's how you get sympathetic poster children to raise money by. If nobody was hitting a woman ever, there would be a lot of broke feminists out there. So they need this stuff. And that's Black Lives Matter needs Black male victims, but only if they keep their mouths shut, and only if while in the presence of Black lesbian women, they get on their knees and kiss their feet and apologize for existing. And it's why when I see, and I have had a few exchanges on Facebook with a couple of Black men that are supportive of Black Lives Matter. And it's like talking to a male feminist about feminism. Just I mean, you could literally picture the eyes glazing over and that faraway look in their eyes as the cognitive dissonance just shuts their brain activity down completely, and getting them to refuse to think. It's a pathetic, horrible situation, but this is going to increase the cancer in the Black community, the things that they suffer from fatherless homes, from children ending up in gangs, from truancy, from teen pregnancy to out of wedlock childbirth, all these problems that are just like right now, 75% of Black children are born out of wedlock. That has a devastating impact on the Black community, and Black Lives Matter wants more of that. Not less.
Clearly stated. And the glorification of gangsterism, the justification of resentment, the denial of the possibilities of the individual to improve his or her lives. It's all there in this statement. And so, I mean, I think the best thing that people can do is really read about Black Lives Matter and see what it actually values, and recognize that, its slogans are very attractive. And the large gatherings, they are exhilarating and euphoric. And many of the people who participate obviously believe that they're participating in a good thing, but this is not a good thing. This is not a productive way of approaching problems.
And stand your ground.
That too,
If you haven't done anything wrong, do not apologize. If you
have
have done something wrong, then it's okay to apologize. No, that's important to do.
Sympathize with Black Lives Matter because there's this one thin thread of apparent decency about their mission. Overall, they're a corrupt, lying organization that has all the wrong objectives for all the wrong reasons. And if you don't agree with them, that does not say anything about you and whether or not you wanted people to be treated fairly under the law. It's not a statement of that at all. So I'm with Tom.
Yep. It's okay not to agree with him. It's definitely okay. I think we've made it clear today that the three of us don't agree with him.
That's for sure.
I think poorly of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that brings us to another happy ending.
Another happy ending.
If we get any more happy endings, we're going to have to call this program the Massage Parlor.
That's the way it goes. But we'll end on a happy note by saying that men
are good. Yes, they are.
Yes, indeed they are. As are you.
Okay.
Take care, folks. Peace.
We'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.